Sylvester Thompson was the sort of person who could light up a room just by walking into it, though the reason people's eyes lit up wasn't always the most positive one. At 5'7", with billowing gray hair and a rainbow striped jacket that fit him like it was borrowed from a clown's wardrobe, he never lacked for color or flair. But no matter how people felt about his flamboyant style, he had one undeniable trait that overshadowed all else. He absolutely, positively, and unflinchingly loved to sing karaoke. He was also as tone-deaf as they came. His pitches soared sky-high at times and dropped into the basement at others, a spectacle that left everyone in the room more than a bit perplexed. But never, not once, did he seem to notice his own off-key renditions. He had discovered the Lucky Notes karaoke lounge purely by chance one Friday night. Drawn by the neon lights in the window and the faint echo of someone butchering an 80s power ballad, Sylvester stepped inside the establishment and immediately felt he'd found his home. The lounge was modest, with a small stage in one corner, a half-dozen tables scattered throughout, and a bar area that seemed to have been constructed from spare parts left over from someone's garage sale. Yet to Sylvester, it was a golden kingdom of possibility. Here, anyone could become a star for 3 minutes if they dared. On his first night at Lucky Notes, Sylvester observed shy patrons discreetly selecting songs and softly singing, hoping not to attract too much attention to their warbling. It baffled him to see them so timid. If he had the chance to sing, he would do it with every fiber of his being. He waited for hours, studying the lounge's process. Then, as the clock neared midnight and the host asked for volunteers to come up for the last round, Sylvester saw his chance. He marched to the sign-up sheet with the confidence of a champion boxer entering the ring and wrote his name in huge, slanted letters. When his turn came, he took the stage and launched into a spirited version of Don't Stop Believin'. Unfortunately for everyone else, it was more of an inadvertent demonstration of what might happen if cats learned to yodel. Through every misaligned note, every off-pitch belt, Sylvester remained deeply, unshakably enthralled with his own performance. So much so that halfway through, tears glistened in his eyes from the sheer passion he believed he was delivering. The stunned silence of the crowd didn't register with him at all, and by the time he wrapped up, he received one of the most awkward sets of applause the lounge had ever produced. If anyone expected Sylvester to take that smattering of hesitant clapping as a cue to step down, they were badly mistaken. The next Monday night, he was back. The following Wednesday, there he was again. By Friday, the staff would exchange glances and brace themselves the moment that rainbow-striped jacket appeared through the doorway. Person after person suffered through Sylvester's staccato squeaks in search of the melody. The lounge manager Tricia tried dropping hints about the place being over capacity or having technical difficulties, but Sylvester always found a way to slip past their polite avoidance. He changed tactics when needed, showing up early, paying for 2 beverages so he wouldn't look loitery, or chatting up the new bartenders who didn't yet know about his singing prowess, or lack thereof. Predictably, the real victims of this karaoke crusade were the regulars, who simply wanted to enjoy a relaxing night out. People slowly started to avoid the evenings Sylvester favored. "He'll be unstoppable tonight," whispered Tony, a local accountant who visited the lounge for some quiet escapism. He'd peer through the window, see that rainbow jacket, shake his head, and turn away. Other patrons who tried to tough it out would bring earplugs or strategically plan their bathroom breaks whenever Sylvester's name popped up on the queue. Now, Sydney, the worn-out karaoke host, had never witnessed a performer so dedicated to singing repeatedly, ignoring all social cues. Sydney tried to be encouraging while tactfully limiting each participant's stage time. After all, that was the standard protocol, 1 song per singer per rotation. But Sylvester had an almost supernatural ability to reinsert his name into the rotation whenever Sydney looked away. Before you knew it, the queue somehow had Sylvester's name scribbled in next to 5 different song titles, each bearing the same flamboyant handwriting and each in a slightly different color of pen. Sylvester? Sydney ventured one night. Usually we let everyone have a turn before repeating. How about we give others a chance and then put your name back on the list, okay? Sylvester would beam in response. "Of course, dear friend," he exclaimed, patting Sydney on the shoulder, his gold rings flashing in the disco lights. "I'm just so excited to share my art." After stepping away, he'd circle around to the other side of the bar and lounge, near the sign-up table. A minute later, someone would approach the list to sign up. They'd look away for a second, searching the karaoke binder for their selection, and Sylvester would stealthily reach in to write his name again. The unsuspecting singer would not even realize they just enabled an off-key infiltration. By the end of the night, Sylvester had somehow managed to sing no fewer than 4 times, leaving him bouncing on his toes with restless energy as he prepared to deliver his next track. What made this spectacle truly bizarre was Sylvester's unwavering belief that people loved his performances. If anyone complimented him, usually because they felt sorry for him or were just being polite, he'd beam with pride. "Thank you, so kind of you to say. I've been working on finding that sweet spot of my range. You can hear it emerging, can't you?" Indeed, they could hear something, but it definitely wasn't the sweet spot. The nights went on, and Lucky Notes from time to time saw an exodus of would-be singers who didn't have the stamina for an off-key marathon. But for all he cost the lounge in short-term revenue, Sylvester more than made up for it in devotion. He bought round after round of drinks, though mostly for himself, and tried to chat up any stray visitor who approached the microphone. Where some lounge managers might have thrown him out, Teresa tried to see if she could rechannel his energy. "Sylvester," she said one evening, "have you ever considered voice lessons? Maybe get some tips on matching pitch?" He let out a hearty laugh. "Me, voice lessons?" He drew himself up like a peacock showing its feathers. "My dear manager, you don't see Picasso second-guessing his brushstrokes, do you? I sing with soul and feeling. That's what matters." One particularly memorable Wednesday, the lounge hosted a karaoke championship night. It was part of an effort to boost attendance, bring in new talent, and show that Lucky Notes could be a place of real musical enjoyment, not just a comedic midnight fiasco. Flyers around town encouraged experienced amateur singers to participate. The prize was a $50 0-cent bar tab and the chance to open for a local band that would occasionally perform covers. The staff had a hush-hush plan to keep Sylvester from taking over, in order to give the competition actual credibility. Trisha asked the bouncer Kurt to guard the sign-up sheet vigilantly. "Let him sing once," she said, "but make sure that's it. Maybe after hearing some real singers, he'll realize he has room to grow." Kurt took his duties seriously. No one was getting extra sign-up turns. So, when Sylvester breezed in wearing a brand new rainbow sequin vest, he was respectfully directed to the designated line. To everyone's surprise, Sylvester only added himself for a single number. "My Heart Will Go On," possibly the single hardest power ballad to sing successfully, especially for a voice as untamed as his. People in the lounge braced themselves for the moment the sign-up queue spat out that dreaded tune. Competitors arrived with their best energy, performing everything from soulful renditions of blues classics to powerful show tunes. There was even a duo who performed an impressive version of Shallow that earned hearty applause. Sydney tried to keep the momentum going, calling for the next contestants in quick succession so the night would remain lively and fun. Meanwhile, Sylvester grabbed a front-row seat and watched with an intensity he rarely displayed, scribbling notes in a small pad he carried. Some people hoped this meant he was learning to adapt his style, maybe gleaning tips on timing or pitch, but if you peered closely at his notebook, you'd notice he was doodling stars and musical notes around random words like fortissimo and passion, which were underlined 3 times. Finally, time came for the infamous number. "And next," Sydney called, hesitating, "we have Sylvester Thompson performing My Heart Will Go On." Half the audience members either gulped or reached discreetly for their earplugs. Yet Sylvester bounced onto the stage with the theatrical energy of someone about to belt out the performance of a lifetime. The hero was ready to slay the dragon of key and pitch. From the moment the iconic opening flute line played, you could hear a collective hush descend. Sylvester closed his eyes, spread his arms out wide, and passionately began to meander through the tune. The discord was immediate. While Celine Dion's voice soared gracefully in everyone's memory, Sylvester's soared in random directions like a hyperactive pigeon with no sense of navigation. On the high notes, he strained so hard that veins popped in his forehead. On the low notes, he dropped into a guttural territory that sounded like an ogre stifling a yawn. It was a roller coaster ride that left the entire room clinging to their sanity. And yet, there was no denying that Sylvester was giving it his all. His face twisted with emotion, his lips trembled as though he were channeling heartbreak from another dimension. Toward the end of the song, as the music swelled, Sylvester raised the microphone high and belted out an extended note, neither in sync with the track nor the original key, but definitely synced with the utter conviction blazing in his eyes. Even if every note was off, no one could say he wasn't fully present in the moment. When the song ended, the stunned silence stretched on for an uncomfortable beat or two. A few people clapped, likely out of secondhand embarrassment or the obligation to fill the awkward quiet. Sylvester bowed, chest heaving as though he'd just run a marathon. Then, ignoring any polite attempts at ushering him off, he launched into a short speech. "This competition is about heart, folks, heart and soul. And not to brag, but I believe I've just demonstrated what it means to hold nothing back." He gave the mic a theatrical toss from one hand to the other before stepping down with a self-satisfied grin. The rest of the night progressed as planned, but no matter who came out on top, Sylvester's performance overshadowed everything. It was so unforgettably jarring that it became the talk of the local karaoke scene for days, if not weeks. Videos surfaced online courtesy of a few curious bystanders who'd recorded it on their phones. Some comments found it hilarious, others found it endearing, and still others declared it an assault on the concept of music itself. But Sylvester, for all his big gestures, never once watched those recordings. "I prefer to live in the moment," he told his few remaining friends, who tried to guide him towards some measure of self-awareness. As the karaoke championship night concluded, Trisha tallied votes. The crowd had chosen an up-and-coming singer named Wendy, whose soulful vocals had actually brought tears to more than one set of eyes. Partway through the announcement of the winner, Sylvester shouted from the back, "No matter who wins, know that I put my whole heart into that stage. That's the real victory." An appreciative laugh rippled through the crowd, but a few people rolled their eyes, vividly recalling the sonic meltdown they had endured. Given how unstoppable Sylvester was, nobody was surprised to see him back the following weekend, fresh off his champion's performance. He seemed even more confident, if that were possible. At every turn, he reminded people that the local press was raving about the competition, casually implying that he played a pivotal role in its success. Trisha, meanwhile, quietly asked the staff to consider an ingenious plan, praising Sylvester for his grand finale. Her hope was to give everyone a break from the ear-shattering recitals. So after his fifth consecutive performance one Saturday, Sydney carefully approached him. "Sylvester," Sydney began, doing their best imitation of sincerity, "you were absolutely our star this week, and we want to make sure you're at your peak. I've heard your next performance might be your biggest yet. Maybe you should rest up until the crowd is really big and ready." Sylvester paused, tapping his chin thoughtfully. "An excellent point. One must never overexpose one's artistry. All the greats learned that live appearances should be rare and special. I read that about Elvis once." He nodded sagely, as though indeed connecting his own journey to the path of true legends. "Yes, okay, I'll step back for a bit. Build the anticipation, as they say. But let's not leave it too long or my fans will riot." His eyes sparkled mischievously. For a moment, it looked like the lounge would get a reprieve. Sylvester headed home that night humming a medley of hits, presumably plotting his triumphant return. 2 days passed, then 3. Some regulars dared to come back in hopes of actually enjoying a quiet karaoke session. A few still asked with hushed wariness, "Do we know if he will be here tonight?" The staff assured them that, to the best of their knowledge, Sylvester was on a self-imposed hiatus, presumably warming up for an epic performance scheduled sometime in the future. However, by the 4th day, an unexpected sight greeted Trisha when she opened up in the afternoon. Sylvester was standing at the entrance, a stack of flyers in hand, each reading "The Marathon Returns." Sylvester's all-night karaoke extravaganza. The design work looked to be done by a well-meaning child in Microsoft Paint, crooked text, random rainbow colors, clip art of a microphone, and a photo of Sylvester mid-belt. He looked triumphant but also slightly villainous, given the intense expression on his face. "I'm just about to put these up around town," he explained brightly, handing her one of the flyers. "It's time my city experiences a full evening of my talents. Lucky Notes is going to be the epicenter of the greatest karaoke night in history." Trish's jaw dropped. "Sylvester, this is an interesting idea, but we haven't—" "No need to thank me," he said, holding up a hand. "All I ask is a stage, a microphone, and a willing audience. The rest is destiny." And with that, he bustled off, leaving Trisha standing there with a flyer that basically announced Lucky Notes would host an unstoppable all-night off-key performance. She could already imagine the earplugs being sold out citywide. She immediately texted her staff to prepare for the worst. The question, though, was how to mitigate the fiasco. Perhaps it would scare patrons away, or maybe they'd treat it like a novelty. Whatever happened, she dreaded the potential damage to the lounge's modest reputation. Sure enough, on the announced day and time, Sylvester showed up in full regalia, an iridescent purple jacket, a sequined hat, and shoes that blinked with small LED lights. He greeted the staff and set up a small tip jar for the cause of melodic freedom, as he put it. There were only a handful of curious onlookers in the lounge, plus a few unsuspecting newcomers who hadn't heard the rumor. Sydney slid into a corner booth and glumly watched beep after beep on the karaoke machine as Sylvester selected his entire set list, one track after another, effectively blocking out any chance of someone else signing up, unless they physically wrestled the microphone from him. He kicked off the marathon with a Michael Jackson classic, but sang it like a bizarre cross between a lullaby and a rap. Next was a boisterous group anthem that he performed solo, hollering for the audience to join the chorus, to which the audience politely declined. He improvised dance moves, shimmied across the small stage, nearly spilled the beer of a startled patron, and refused to exit after each song ended. Instead, he took a short breath, maybe a sip of water, and announced the next number. From Total Eclipse of the Heart to Hit Me Baby One More Time, no era or genre was off limits in his quest for karaoke immortality. By the second hour, the lounge had reached a peculiar equilibrium. Some folks left in a hurry, while a small crowd of comedic thrill-seekers remained. They got a twisted sort of enjoyment out of the dissonance. It was so bad, it was entertaining. People posted clips on social media, marveling at Sylvester's unwavering dedication. Despite the lounge being half empty, there was a tangible sense of camaraderie among those who stayed, like they were all surviving some bizarre endurance test together. Trisha attempted to cut in a few times. "Sylvester, maybe it's time to let others have the mic for a song or two," but he'd wave her off. "Don't worry, manager dear. I've tested my stamina, and I can keep going for hours. I owe it to these lovely fans who came here just for me." Several times, the staff tried coaxing him off the stage with offers of free drinks or a complimentary snack. "How about trying our new nacho platter in the back so you can rest your voice?" But he deflected every attempt. "My throat is fine. In fact, this lukewarm herbal tea is all I need," he'd say, sipping a mug that he insisted on bringing himself, fragrant steam wafting from the top. He claimed it was a secret recipe from a vocal coach he used to know. Of course, no one could verify the validity of that claim. By the third hour, a new wave of patrons arrived to witness the spectacle. Word had spread on social media that there was an off-key marathon going on at Lucky Notes. Drunk friends dared each other to show up, and ironically, the lounge started earning more business than on a typical Wednesday. It was quickly becoming a so shocking it's funny phenomenon. People laughed and took selfies with Sylvester's swirling figure in the background, his voice cracking at the high notes. When midnight approached, Sylvester was sweating profusely, but still unstoppable. His hair hung in damp strands across his forehead, and the LED shoes had run out of battery at some point, but he trudged on like a soldier. He dedicated a ballad to all the incredible people who believed in me, and if it sounded like a dying walrus, well, fewer people minded by that point. The environment had turned a bit rowdy, with some folks actually hollering encouragement. A group in the back even started chanting Sylvester, Sylvester, which stoked his confidence to new levels of unstoppable bravado. Only around 2 in the morning did Sylvester finally show signs of vocal strain. His voice began squeaking more than normal. Though that's a high bar to measure. He guzzled more tea in between lines. The staff was exhausted and the bartenders were ready to close up. Technically, Lucky Notes was licensed to operate until 2:30 a.m. on weekends, but they had never come this close to using every allotted minute in a single singer's spree. Determined to see this fiasco end, Sydney hovered by the control panel, poised to cut the music if it came to that. But to their amazement, Sylvester seemed to sense his voice was slipping. At the tail end of a battered rendition of Bohemian Rhapsody, as he wheezed the final "Any Way the Wind Blows," he sank to one knee, microphone clutched to his chest. Then, like a king abdicating his throne, he lowered the mic with trembling reverence. He slowly rose, turned to the audience, and gave a genteel bow. "Thank you," he whispered huskily. "I have done what I came here to do." Applause erupted from those who had waited to see if he'd ever stop. Some laughed and cheered, impressed by his endurance if nothing else. Sylvester, pride radiating from his sweat-soaked face, dabbed at his brow with a sequined handkerchief he pulled from his vest pocket. Reluctantly, almost like a child putting away a beloved toy, he placed the microphone back on the stand and pointed to the stunned staff. "I leave the stage to you," he said. "But don't forget, I sang for you. I sang for all of us." Sydney hit the stop button on the karaoke system and exhaled a deep, visceral sigh of relief. Trisha hurried over, practically sagging with exhaustion. She said, "That was something none of us will ever forget. You definitely gave people an experience." "Glad I can share my gift," he croaked, still high on adrenaline. "I think I might just do this again sometime. But for now, let me rest. My soul is depleted." As he shuffled out, leaving a trail of sparkle and spectators behind, the staff stared at each other in a collective daze. The lounge was strewn with half-empty glasses, a few toppled chairs from the rowdier moments, and crumpled flyers that spoke of an epic night's events. In some twisted sense, Sylvester's marathon had brought more attention and customers in one night than the lounge had seen in a month. Yet the cost to their eardrums was incalculable. They were left with the sense that they had survived a natural disaster, like an off-key hurricane that uprooted everything in its path, only to find themselves oddly grateful for still being intact. In the aftermath, Lucky Notes became a local legend. People bragged, "I was there for the marathon," comparing stories of which horrific notes sent them reeling. Some insisted Sylvester was a musical savant. Others insisted he was an unstoppable force of chaos, but no one denied that he embodied a particular brand of passion difficult to find in the world of karaoke. He was the champion nobody had asked for, and yet, in his own bewildering way, he had captured the hearts and shattered the eardrums of everyone present. Weeks later, a rumor emerged that Sylvester was planning a new event, Off-Key Palooza. Word was that it involved multiple nights, different costume changes, and perhaps a live band. Lucky Notes' staff tried to stay one step ahead of him, hoping to maintain some semblance of control. But on the off chance he returned, they also found themselves weirdly excited in a masochistic sense. Perhaps there was an addictive quality to Sylvester's unstoppable optimism. Perhaps, having lived through his unwavering spirit once, they were curious to see what new heights of vocal dissonance he could scale next. After all, a karaoke lover like Sylvester was bound to reappear. Microphone in hand, illusions of grandeur intact, and comedic disregard for the laws of melody ready to share once again. And on that day, Lucky Notes would buckle up and hold on tight, waiting for the next off-key marathon that would inevitably commence.